Let's just get the shit out of the way, man.
All right. Well, normally Omar does the introduction. I'm not 100% sure why he is so...
Yeah, you know what you did. Just do the shit, man.
Okay, a little butthurt. That's fine. Hey, so Iron Cultists, we have Bryce Lewis coming on. Actually, the client I've worked with for more time than any other, which I know doesn't make anyone else feel threatened. It's been about...
Why would you say that?
Can you let me do the introduction?
Whatever, man. Yeah, go ahead.
It's been about 10 years that I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with Bryce Lewis, and he's now just off his 2019 USAPL Raw Nationals 105 Kilo Championship. Set an unofficial world record in the total, and we are looking at moving forward and doing the 2020 World Championships going back to Belarus, where that was his first World Championships in 2017, which we got to do together, which was awesome. And which he placed second in behind Christoph Wierbecki, and he recently won the World Championships back in 2018. So this is a really interesting episode. Omar's kind of going to be the host on this one, despite what may sound like a non-interested attitude or a butthurt attitude. I think butthurt, probably the way I describe your tone. But he's going to be asking us about what it's been like to work with one another for actually a decade this year.
Great.
Awesome. And with that enthusiastic tone from Omar, we'll get into it.
Why'd you bring him?
Listen.
You could go, Bryce. You don't have to be here. I mean,
Are we all supposed to clap?
No, I mean, I just don't want you here. I think I was very clear with what I just said.
I think jealousy does not look good on you, Omar. Your headband looks great. Jealousy, not so much.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, Eric, I'm not jealous. I'm just wondering what he's doing here.
Well, we discussed this. We scheduled him. We were going to discuss our coaching relationship. This has been in the books for months.
Weird. I just don't recollect that. And I don't know why you do such a thing. You said, hey, man, I want to talk to you. And he's here. So.
Yeah, he's, I mean... We at first we discussed having Matt Ogus and Bryce Lewis on at the same time, but you just started crying, and I don't know what happened. And you hung up.
It's just really weird that you keep bringing your past into the present and future. And I know Iron Culture is history, culture, science, and maybe you're taking history because he's history, his story, literally. But I just don't understand why he's here.
You held it together so well for Alberto Nunez. I didn't think this would be a problem.
Well, that's because I could see the clear correlation between how he looks and how I look. So in him, I see myself. And so I actually feel good about it. Bryce, he's strong. No. Get him out of here.
Right. So caramel-colored individuals with long hair, you see as just that was me on my pathway to finding you.
Exactly.
But this muscular, pale behemoth of a man over here, just you can't see the connection.
He's just really strong, and it's intimidating, so... I thought we're just supposed to be honest here, but apparently this isn't a circle of trust, so I don't know what's going on. I think should I just leave?
No. You're going to complete this triangle of travesty, even though it's not a circle of trust, because we need someone to interview me and Bryce, so we actually have to do a podcast. I'm sorry.
All right, well, I mean, hey, Bryce, hey, man, welcome to the channel or whatever. Glad to have you part of Iron Culture.
Thanks. I'm feeling the love right now. I'm feeling
feel very
really
welcome.
Supported. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah. You could sense it on my voice. So I'm just glad that you feel that way. You are in fact actually one of our repeat guests. I liked you more before when we weren't talking about coaching, but I suppose once again we'll get over it. We have the man, the myth, the legend. I've made this claim before, and Bryce tells me each time, please don't do it. But we have the world's strongest ginger in the house. But we're talking about the client-coaching relationship that has been going on, am I right, gents, in saying this, for damn near a decade?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to figure out off camera, but I know that I was coaching you into your first meet, which was February of 2010. So... I'm not sure how long before that we were coaching. I think we started in 2009. So if we just started in 2009, we have technically been working together for 10 years.
Wow. Well, look, anyone who's known Eric for 10 years must be someone pretty special. And I guess the first question I'd ask you, Bryce, is what's Eric really like? Like, what was he like in 2010? I want to hear, look, I know you have the dirt, and this is so, Eric, gotcha. You thought I was going to be jealous. Mm-mm. Now I want to hear from Bryce, all the juicy gossip of what Eric was like 10 years of knowing him. I'm like, wow. I bet there are things that no one but you know, and that's both scary and liberating.
I got to break it to you. Eric has been pretty darn consistent for that amount of time. I've seen your bare ass when you were doing a bodybuilding competition and you were getting Tanner put on by fellow guest Alberto Nunez. But that's about all the juice I have, to be honest. Pretty consistent otherwise.
That's not even juice. That's probably a highlight of your coaching relationship, I'd assume.
Well, when you are a well manicured and put together fake sociopath operating in life, and you really don't want to get caught, you got to be consistent.
Yeah, you've been consistent at pretending to be morally consistent, and it's very admirable.
You know what? You know what they say about not being a serial killer? Fake it till you make it.
Right. Hey, at this time, just before we actually get into the interview, we should state that we do not joke about serial killers on this podcast, and we've never insinuated that any particular guest has been a serial killer. Just the legal speak that we have to do, Bryce, before we begin.
Sounds good. Yeah, no problem.
If that did occur, it wasn't us. It was our prior hosts who we fired and we're now leading as the co-owners.
Change being the
yes.
change. Yes, sir.
Yeah, be the change you want to see in the world. So.
Well, let me just say that, Bryce, this is very interesting because I think it's kind of wild to me that you have a lot of lifters out there that, they coach themselves, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I actually have been under the bosom of Eric now maybe for about a year, and I can immediately see the benefits. And I think when you find the right coach, it's not an insult to anyone, but you think to yourself, wow, why didn't I do this before? Or even what it allows you to achieve that you might not even understand until you go through the process. Before we get into your coaching relationship, however, this 10-year anniversary, I want everyone just to understand a little bit more about Bryce. I first saw you on Yes Eric on Matt Ogus's channel, probably 2012. It may have been the squat tip or a mobility tip. You're squatting, I remember. So this is just a funny anecdote. I remember you were squatting 4 plates, Bryce, in the video, and no one knows this, and you could corroborate this with me, man. That in YouTube 2011, YouTube 2012, if you squatted 4, you're doing it just reps. I forget honestly what the particulars were, but you're squatting 4 plates for reps. It was it was earth shattering on YouTube. But just tell me a little bit more about yourself, man. Like your training journey. Let's get you up to when you met Eric. So just about yourself, what got you into lifting, all those things, and then to the point of when you met Eric. So that's maybe 2010. So there's years before that.
Cool. I started taking activity seriously in sophomore year of high school when I joined the volleyball team, and I played volleyball and really enjoyed it for the rest of high school and into my first 2 years of college playing club volleyball. I coached for a number of years afterwards, but I started lifting right out of high school pretty seriously. Like I had a weight set, early on, but I didn't really take things seriously. But at the start of college, I started taking lifting seriously to see if I could get myself better for volleyball. And, just looking online for programs and trying to figure out what would make me stronger. And that's when I found bodybuilding.com, the bodybuilding.com forums, and just read as much as I possibly could. And then I saw the winner of like a local natural bodybuilding competition and saw pictures. And I thought, well, I could do that. I'm really enjoying this lifting thing. And there was kind of a crossover period where I was training for bodybuilding, like for size, but also still doing volleyball. And then at some point, I decided to make the switch and did a few bodybuilding competitions. I did bodybuilding total for about 4 years or so, a number of competitions at different weights. In California, all natural bodybuilding competitions. And then at the same time, some of my friends were doing some powerlifting competitions in their off season for bodybuilding. And I saw that and saw, oh, wow, that looks cool. Look at all the weight they're lifting. It's the same kind of training that I'm doing right now, just, slightly different, a little heavier. And oh wow, it looks like they don't have to diet down to do that. That's fun. And I did a powerlifting competition and absolutely loved it. And for my own personal experience, the dieting for bodybuilding and kind of the structure and stress of all that just didn't really add up to make bodybuilding as a whole sport worth it for me. And so the opposite was true for powerlifting. It really was worth it for me. The training was awesome. I still have to have attention to nutrition, but not to the same degree of controlled starvation that you have to do in bodybuilding. And I was succeeding and loved it. So early on in that time, I had known that Eric was a bodybuilder, and I kind of found out about you and about 3DMJ on the bodybuilding.com forums and followed along with your own lifting and your own journey there. Met up with some of you guys in person. I think I met you at a bodybuilding competition. We were both competing at the same competition. And then later on asked you to coach me for powerlifting. So that I think brings us up to present.
Yeah, we were. There's been a number of times Bryce and I have tried to recollect the early days, and it just goes to tell you, like, it was actually over 10 years ago now, so it's unsurprising. But I remember specifically, I think first time we started talking might have been on the bodybuilding.com forums, just because I think you had a log, I had a log, and Berto had a log. So in 2009, I was dieting down to compete, you were dieting down to compete, and Berto was essentially kind of like my coach. Alongside, earlier for that period, Lane Norton was doing some of my nutrition as well. And, Bryce was talking about how a lot of bodybuilders were doing powerlifting in their off season. I would say probably the first person who kind of started to inspire that was Lane when he made the shift and started doing powerlifting. And it's something that I had done. I think my first meet was 2006 back in Georgia before I moved, became a trainer. And then I had done meets in California from 2007 onward. And so saw Bryce preparing, I was preparing, we talked a little bit on the forums, and this was a time the bodybuilding.com forums were really cool. Like in I'd say 2005 to 2012, there was this small group of like mostly amateur competitive natural bodybuilders who were all just logging and supporting each other. It was a really cool environment. We all had, shared eating disorders and aspirations towards shredded glutes in a time when they were rare. It was good times. So anyway, so I first met Bryce in person backstage at the 2009 Cap City, which is actually where 3DMJ was formed almost. Like myself and Jeff Alberts ended up being in the overall with me. Berto was there coaching me, and Brad would met us when he competed against Berto the last year in 2008, and he was backstage as well. And that's when we first started talking. So quite literally, Bryce was there at the creation of 3DMJ, and I want to say he was like my second or third client. We started with sponsored clients to kick off 2010. And I remember the first time I actually did anything resembling coaching was, I don't know if you remember this, Bryce, but the Sunday after the Cap City, we all met up at the Powerhouse Gym. We were all way overfed from binging the night before. And they have this back room that was set aside for like strongman stuff. And we just basically took that whole area over, grabbed a bunch of squat racks. And Bryce was deadlifting 405 for doing like doubles or triples or something like that. And he's having trouble keeping his back straight. And I went over to try to help him keep shift his form a little bit to try to keep his back straight on 405 deadlifts. And I don't remember back then thinking this guy's going to be a beast of a power lifter.
Your first reaction wasn't like, this boy has a lot of potential. You're like, I need to fix this back ASAP.
I was like, it's one day post comp. I don't want him to get hurt,
Yeah. Right.
And then I went over to flip tires and swing kettlebells like an idiot, but it was a lot of fun. Anyway, we have some pictures from that day. It was a lot of fun. We were all shredded but bloated and then lifting heavy weights. I think, shortly after that, you were like, hey, this bodybuilding thing it's great, but it's not. And I want to do powerlifting. And that was the first time I really had the opportunity to coach a legit powerlifter. I'd done a little bit of like powerlifting style coaching through my personal training clients. A few had decided they maybe wanted to do it. I think I technically coached one powerlifter prior to Bryce. So he was truly my first powerlifting client in a real extended sense. And man, I learned how to coach powerlifting around the same time as coaching Bryce, which is pretty cool. Like, Bryce has seen me at the point when I was only comfortable enough to modify existing programs and to make them more customized, all the way up to fully writing my own customized programs for Bryce. And he has tried everything from done properly West Side templates. And by properly, I don't mean like West Side says you should do them, but the way that makes sense. We were talking about this not too long ago, to Shiko templates modified for his needs, to kind of old school RTS, Mike T inspired kind of approaches, and then into just the way I program now, the Helmsian style, I guess. But yeah, so it's pretty cool to look back, because he's been in the WPA World Championships back in 2011 and Sleepy Little Portola, which I think the closest thing to an international competitor we had was a guy from New Jersey who was there.
It's a whole other world, New Jersey.
Yes. Yeah.
You're like, who is this guy?
Yep. Everyone else was from like the West Coast. Yeah. And then to doing raw unity and actually dieting down to the 181 class, which for those who know Bryce now is strictly as a 105 lifter. There was a time when he was 93, before that 198s, and then very briefly 181s, which I think is probably too much of a reminder of why bodybuilding sucked. But yeah.
Now, I will say that I think your coaching relationship, both of you, is kind of a representation of the evolution of natural lifting over the last decade. It's actually very interesting, the parallels. Just before we go on, I do have a quick question, Bryce. Do you ever send Eric any physique updates or anything, or was it strictly like you started coaching from powerlifting, or was there a little bit like an indecisive period where there were some physique updates and so forth? Because I have a personal question after.
I think you always left the door open that because my intention early on was still, I'm going to try this powerlifting thing in between bodybuilding seasons. Yeah. So I said that at the outright, and your response was, all right, let me know when you're ready to switch gears and we'll go there. But I just don't think we ever went down that road again.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, because I I send Eric obviously physique updates, and I was just wondering what his responses are like maybe then for your powerlifting, because when I send updates, he'll respond by saying things like, maybe you should quit while you're far behind. This isn't for you. Stop sending me these. So I was just curious. It seems like you guys have developed a very unique relationship, something that's a little bit different, Eric, than my relationship with you.
So Bryce knows this. He posts a lot about, coaching psychology and coaching styles and relationships, and right. I would say the evidence definitely comes down on having a autonomy supported relationship, and letting the client drive their goals, being supportive, acting as an ally, letting them be the captain but you're the navigator. But I think that's more of an approach you take with someone who has the potential to be a true athlete. Right. When you're coaching someone with delusions, it's a little different, and normally you just try to break them out of the delusion as many chances as you get, and try to discourage them from doing something that will only really harm them in the long run.
I said I'm going to be on stage at the Olympia, and I don't understand why you don't believe in me, and I think that's my main limitation is you.
Well, I'm always, like I've told you many times, you can fire me anytime you want.
I was thinking Eric's going for that reverse psychology approach where it's supposed to motivate you even more.
Well, let me ask you then, because Bryce, for those that are unaware too, I mean, I just got to give you some big ups, man, because we had you on the podcast before, and Eric knows you as a client, as an athlete, as someone also who has their own company, who is also a coach, who is a very well-regarded coach, but as someone maybe that has been making a lot of content online, you were one of the main catalysts, man. I think you brought, in terms of the quality of coaching to strength training, so I'm including powerlifting and beyond, to the masses once again, you guys were instrumental. TSA, the resources that you put out, and also here are the funny parts, taken straight out of the Eric playbook of I don't know what you guys are doing in order to be financially viable. A lot of free resources that you guys created on TSA. Just you were undercover, instrumental when it comes to, I think, strength training as a whole, programming, creating accessibility of information that before was maybe a little mysterious, maybe a little nebulous. And I don't know if you get the credit that you deserve, but besides being just a fantastic athlete, I think you yourself as a coach have done so much. So I think this conversation that we're about to have is really interesting because not only are you being coached by Eric, but you yourself are a coach and you get into the psychology of lifting. So I just think it's interesting, man. And I want to, publicly give you the respect that you deserve for what you've done to the community or for the community.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And I like to this day attribute so much of that to having really good role models in 3DMJ and in Eric and actually early on before starting 3DMJ, I asked to be a fifth coach for 3DMJ. I drove up to Sacramento and had a conversation with Alberto and just kind of said, what would that look like? Is that something that's a possibility at kind of a turning point in my life? And the answer I got back was maybe, but I think you'll be fine on your own. And I think having a little bit of reassurance from some people I looked up to made that a lot easier.
Yeah. I remember when we talked about that, one of the things I was thinking about was, are you wanting to join 3DMJ because it's a solid, secure choice, or like if we could wave a magic wand, would you rather have your own thing? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when I asked the wave a magic wand question, you were like, yeah, that would be ideal. I would love to have my own creation and be able to do what 3DMJ does for powerlifting. Because while 3DMJ does work with some powerlifters, we're probably better known and probably more branded, if you will, to use a term that makes me throw up a little bit in my mouth, as like a natural bodybuilding coaching company. And I thought it was just really cool to have that aspect of our coaching relationship change and become kind of this mentoring thing. Like, hey, how do you coach? For those who don't know, I want to say starting in 2011 or 2012, Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the moderator for our group Facebook, and we were actually co-coaching people. You were like an intern mentor. I was your mentor, and you were an intern coach for 3DMJ, which is kind of where you cut your chops, and I got the opportunity to do my first like coach the coach thing, which was cool. And unlike the online coaching, I had some experience teaching at Bryan College, teaching personal trainers, but this is the first time I was like, oh, let me think of how I would help someone else be a good online coach. And I think that probably made me a better online coach more than anything else. I had to question all of my own systems. I had to think about, why do I do this? Which of these things do I just do? And Bryce asks a lot of good questions. So I think, while the intention was to make, to give Bryce all the tools and resources he needed to be effective with TSA, which he knocked out of the park, I think one of the side effects that I'm really grateful for, and I'm really appreciative of having you in my life, Bryce, is that it made me a better coach and more intentional and question a lot of the things I did. And I'd say that's a two-way street, dude. So I just want to give you some props back.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
Okay, I'm feeling the love now, and I guess we could open it up. Bryce, let me ask you both as a coach now and then as a client, what does a coaching relationship look like for you? Like what? So when you said, okay, you know what, I died it down. I don't like this. I did powerlifting meet. I enjoyed it. I think Eric's a good coach. I'm going to hire him. One, what is that process? What does the coaching process look like? And how does it then evolve over time? Because we're talking now 2010 all the way now to 2020.
Yeah. Unlike the way that I coach a lot of athletes now, and I think Eric's pretty understanding here, like I send, and this is probably for a long time, I send you updates like every 3 weeks or something like that. So I think it's important to have a coach that's not kind of micromanaging or wants feedback on a super regular basis, and that the athlete is just okay coming to the coach when needed, as long as you've got enough information to coach effectively. That has been kind of integral. Like if I had to give updates on just an every week basis, it would just kind of be a strain. And you've been really understanding about not needing that all the time, like kind of finding this sweet spot of frequency for communication that has worked really well over time. Yeah, that's been really important.
Yeah, I would say like we started, it was definitely weekly updates, and it was very much kind of my typical template. He went through the funnel of how we did things at 3DMJ. And then there was a period where, man, we were probably talking more than once a week where we were talking about mentoring. We were coaching other people together. I was coaching him. So we was a lot of regular communication, I'd say, between like 2000, late 2009, early 2010, whenever we can't quite remember when we first started working together, all the way through maybe, I would say it started getting less frequent right around the time when you committed to, look, I'm not going to do the 181s anymore, and I'm definitely not going to do bodybuilding, because there was a lot more nutrition micromanagement back then. I was doing Bryce's nutrition and his training. So that's kind of the time in that era where there was a lot more week to week, and it was a lot more like macro adjustments and things like that, kind of that era, and practical strategies and things like that. Also, his performance was just less consistent because he was trying to be, he ended up being like, a world champion 105 lifter who was competing in the 181s. I don't think that was very sustainable. He did raw unity in the 181s in another meet as well. And, but I think after that point, when you were just like, yeah, I'm done with this, I think that was right around the time you were like, I'm pretty sure I'm done with bodybuilding as well. Like, I think you closed that door. I specifically remember handling you at your first APA Body Tribe meet. I think we established this was November 2010, and there was a guy who was a super heavy, and he missed a 700-pound deadlift, I think, twice, and his three big buddies were all like, "Boo! Like, how did you give him like a red light, two red lights on that? Bad referees." And he hitched. And then Bryce comes up and as a 198 pulls 680 on his third attempt. And this is a federation where if you want to break a record, you can take a fourth attempt. So at least back in the day, you could. I don't know if the APA has changed. I think he deadlifted like 694, and that was the record. And I remember telling him afterwards, I was like, Bryce, the only thing that's going to prevent you from becoming an elite level lifter and maybe one day a world champion is not getting hurt. And I felt like from that point on, we were together. Not that I was like trying to push you that way. We were focused on powerlifting, because I think when you're sitting there deadlifting weights that the super heavies can't lift, you won. It was a backyard world championships, but nonetheless, it was a world championship that he was able to win, and he's setting records in the APA in 3 different weight classes. And then going to Raw Unity, we're like, shit, man, like this is you're good at this. You were very good at this, and I think that reward kind of created that kind of rolling forward mechanism. And to kind of look behind the veil a little bit for me as a coach, the reason why I have very much a non-top-down coaching strategy with Bryce, which is something I do not just because of the athlete being good, but anytime I have a relationship with someone who lasts a long time, I let the person to some degree dictate what that relationship looks like, within what I feel what I need to do my job effectively. And there have been times where I've been like, hey, Bryce, I would like to hear from you a little more frequently and things like that. But I think we find that place where I have what I need to be effective and helpful and a good resource to the athlete, and they have the support they need, and it matches their personality. But that can, in my opinion, especially in an online coaching format, it can really only come once you get to a point where you have established a coaching relationship. There's trust, there's understanding. You understand the individualized approach for the person, and they step more and more into the kind of the leadership role, and you step more into the support role. I think that's the natural progression towards a extended relationship with an athlete. It may look a little different where that is along the spectrum, but within person or within relationship, it changes. And, so it's been really cool to have that shift over time with Bryce. And I think that has built, like, he's, to his credit, he's built a lot of self-efficacy. I don't want to speak for you, Bryce, but I imagine that actually being a coach and seeing that a lot of this stuff is kind of guesswork, and a lot of this is creating the right environment for progress and being collaborative. And I think we both started, there's like an era, like we came from the voices in powerlifting were either these secret Russian manuals, where it's like you get this impression of the stoic Russian coach sitting there who just magically knows what your 1RM is and what the secret is for you. You don't share it. You probably can't even speak proper English, but they've got the magic. Or these largely unintelligible systems that come down from a similar coach, Louis Simmons, that even when you do follow what he says to a T, you listen to his disciples and they go, look, you're not really doing West Side. The only true way to do West Side is to train at West Side. And if it's not working, it's because you didn't interpret the gospel of Louis Simmons correctly. Like, you need to go back and read the West Side book of Methods again. You're not doing it right. And I actually remember specifically being on the contest prep forums, and I was posting about the quote unquote West Side templates that I was using with myself and Bryce. And kind of the way we set them up, just so people can understand, is we had the deadlift was the main lift on the ME day or the DE day. So the speed work day and the heavy day, and they'd flip on the other day. So you do speed work with one, you went heavy on the other. And I had a 3-week progression, which is like the extent of what you're allowed to do with West Side. And we would do like a double at 90%, try to match our PB double on week 2. And then week 3, we try to set a new PR. And then we'd flip the exercise order. So I didn't want the conjugate system to be so erratic that you were doing a different lift every single week. So we at least kept the same lift or lift variation every 3 weeks and only had like 2 or 3 variations that we'd swap out. And it worked really well. And when I look back on it, it's, in my opinion, like if I look back at what West Side explained how to do things, it's like the only reasonable interpretation of how to run it in a way that actually makes sense. And we didn't do like band and chain work for too long. We were doing a lot of like doubles and triples at 70%, like for raw lifter stuff. But anyway, like this is an era where top-down coaching, secret methods, and believing that your coach needs to have this magic thing and just trust the process was kind of the way the personalities in coaching were espousing things to be. And I very quickly realized that I did not have the secret answers. I didn't know what to do. Bryce was getting strong on programs that would, like, way stronger on programs that I would use with other people. So for example, I remember I ran a program with him that took me from like a 455 to 475 deadlift. And he went from a 495 deadlift to a 625 deadlift in the same amount of time period. Yeah. So I was like, hold on, maybe Bryce is just more talented than me, and I'm not the secret tactician manipulating my puppets with programming. And to give a lot of credit to his natural talent, I realized I needed to not let him get hurt, not let him hurt himself or push it too far, and not hold him back. I needed to make sure that I created a clear pathway without obstacles to put him in the best position, because he was going to take care of the rest with the talent he had. So prevent burnout, prevent injury, foster a good relationship, and give him a lot of opportunities to succeed in any way I could, and always be available as a resource and as a sounding board and for like emotional support. And then shit, man, he'll just keep progressing if he stays in the sport. And that was, I think, a really good humbling experience for me, because I went away from that mentality of you've got to do exactly what I say or you're breaking my secret system. Because I remember the crutch that I would use, like if someone didn't have perfect adherence, they didn't hit their macros within 5 grams, or they went off program or something like that, and it didn't work, I would, no matter what, I would ascribe it to that. Like, oh, well, you were 10 grams off your carbs. That's why you didn't lose weight at all for the last 3 weeks, because of that Wednesday, And then, the client asks, how does that work? I go, don't worry about it. Look, I got a magic system, okay? And you didn't follow it, so the magic doesn't work.
The system's infallible.
Exactly. So it was the way of deflecting my own existential crisis that I was avoiding, of going, oh my God, maybe this top-down coaching thing is not magic. Maybe I am just doing my best to make educated guesses. And I think through mentoring Bryce as a coach, when he had those same existential crises, and when he was starting to realize, like, wait, I can't just manipulate volume and intensity and get a perfectly predictable outcome, I was like, no, you can't. I have to face this. I have to acknowledge this myself and change the way my coaching was. And that's when I really started getting into autoregulation and reading more of Mike T's stuff and thinking about RPE. And, we played with that for a long time. But I think more importantly than the system of autoregulation was the ethos, the philosophy underneath it, where I went from a top-down to a bottom-up coaching. And I think that's what you see today when, the relationship is very much dictated by the athlete. It's more athlete-centered. And I'll only step in if I feel like the way the relationship is going is making me less effective. But it's all because I can't help the athlete. And I think, I learned that through working with Bryce.
Bryce, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just one of the things early on that I think really helped me a lot was you taught me some tools to take care of myself in a lot of ways. Like I think that a lot of athletes depend on their coaches so closely for all the answers and to be kind of ready at a moment's notice to kind of answer questions, but to teach the athlete some of the tools they need to adjust their own training in expected or heavier than expected, or you need to train 3 times a week instead of 4, or you need to switch your days around, or you're going on vacation, or like all those kind of situations that happen in real time, especially when you work with someone for so long. They've got to be able to adjust things on their own, and that's one of the things that has kind of helped me just sustain things. And the other thing really is, you can program at kind of the top end of someone's ability to make progress, or you can program almost so easy that someone's not making progress. But finding some middle ground that allows for some of the fluctuations in performance and stress and everything else going on has made things really sustainable. And if you're working with someone for a long period of time, that's really important.
Now, Bryce, here's the question, because those listening might be under the assumption when we try and define what coaching is. It's like, well, wait a second. Okay, so coaching, it's programming. So you give someone a program. If there's dietary advice, there's also nutrition programming where you give them the nutrition, and that's pretty much it. But for actual coaches out there, if you had to describe what coaching is, I'll first start with Bryce and then I'll ask you, Eric, underneath this entire banner, how would you define then coaching? Because it's so much more than that, but kind of online, you see this, the spreadsheet and the calculator. You're good to go, kid. Like, what is coaching then, Bryce, if we had to break it down both as a client then and as a coach?
So I think there's kind of a few systems that are kind of part of that complete package. Like you have a package where you're taking care of some of the nuts and bolts of what they're doing in the gym or what they're doing in the kitchen when they're eating. You've got a piece that's concerned with technique and how someone's lifting. There's a really big emotional support piece. So, when they're experiencing problems, you're there to help. So you're not just, the robot punching in the numbers and spitting out the master plan like Eric was talking about. We're humans, that have stress and, we experience life problems and we need support to go through those and need someone to be able to lean on to get through some of that stuff. So it's far more than the numbers. It's far more than, just the bits as far as that's concerned. It's kind of support for the longer term. And that's something I try to do.
Yeah, to kind of to give like a concrete example of that, I think you might give someone the path through the forest. That might be the spreadsheet, the periodization cycle. You might sit down over Skype and discuss like, here, I'm going to write you like I think 3-4 week blocks. They're going to get more specific. The percentages are going to go up, and the goal is for us, in that last 4-week block to probably be touching numbers you never hit before a couple weeks out before we start the taper. And okay, we discussed, when do you feel freshest? Okay, we'll move the deadlift taper back starting a little earlier. We'll start tapering the bench and the squat a little later. And let's try to get in one lift, before you actually compete. Okay, you're going to be traveling. Let's try to do that 24 hours prior. Are you going to be coaching that day? Like you work through all the logistics, you plan the path. But I think what a lot of coaches, people get that. But what a lot of coaches don't realize is that the intellectual understanding of that path and logically why it goes there versus the experience of going through it when you're incredibly emotionally invested and in the middle of it. You're in the forest. It's dark. The canopy's too big. There's howling voices in the wilderness. You can be perfectly on track and feel like everything's going wrong. You have one bad workout. The RPE feels a little higher than normal. Your back is feeling tweaky. You have to adjust the load downward. The day of your competition changes by one day. And while these are very easy things to manipulate with the tools you have as a coach, the emotional response of the athlete might be huge. It's all over. I need to pull out. A good example of this in bodybuilding is when someone goes through prep and they go through that tweener phase when they're going from like 16% to 13% body fat as a male. I can't tell you how many people just pull out of the competition because they think they're just losing muscle mass when it's glycogen and the fact that they're going from not in shape to a little bit less not in shape, but it just looks worse, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing can happen in powerlifting. What do you do when an athlete comes back to you and they have been looking at all their athletes, their fellow competitors on Instagram or social media? Or what do you do when they start changing their program based on what they see around them? So a lot of it is providing that voice in the forest. Like, yeah, you know where the path is, but you're the guide, and you have an objective view, more objective at least than your athlete, or at least a removed view from the experience of lifting. And that's a double-edged sword. So as a coach, you have to realize that the removed view is useful because you can avoid all those emotional pitfalls. But at the same time, it means that you have less awareness of what's going on than the athlete themselves.
Yeah.
So this is where there's pros and cons to that top-down approach. If you're removed and therefore you think you have all the answers and you just need to do what I say, yeah, you give them that objective viewpoint that can help them sometimes, but you're also missing all of the valuable information and the keys and the things how you might individualize that approach if you don't recognize, take into account, and utilize the athlete as your resources to help them. So the things they're noticing are going to be a mixture of things that both help them and hurt them. And it's what you do about it. So I think I'll give you a specific example with Bryce. As we get closer and closer to competition, the load is we're intensifying. And in my experience with Bryce, and correct me if you feel like this is different, Bryce, you get a lot more beat up by load than volume. And your performance becomes a little less predictable when we're dealing with, I'd say, loads closer to your 1RMs, even when we're doing reps. And there are many times when I get a message from you on Facebook, and we're, let's say, 3 weeks out from our comp, and you're like, this feels awful. I've got 3x2 planned, and we go, well, let's lower the weight and do 2x3, or actually the exact opposite example. I said that kind of dyslexic, but like we lower the load, or we use RPE, or we do something, or we push a day back, or we pull out. Let's just do one single on deadlifts. And we find ways to adjust. But when we're 12 weeks out and we're dealing with moderate loads and higher volumes, yeah, like you said, it'll be 3 weeks before we even talk, and it's not a big deal. And I think it's a combination between that actually being the reality, this physiological reality is that you get more beat up from heavy loads. We need them to do really well, but we need the right amount. And you're also, oh shit, I'm 3 weeks out from a meet. You're more emotionally stressed. So helping you find that emotional regulation, letting you just have that. Sometimes even though you can logically know something, like here's an example. When I get near, I have a mild fear of heights. So when I'm near an edge and I look down, I get freaked out. I have an emotional response. Someone going, that glass is 3 feet thick, doesn't help me not feel like I'm going to fall. That doesn't change. But the reassurance is appreciated to some degree, and that's what I'm doing my own self-talk in my head when I walk near that, and I want to be able to hang out with people and go to the Sky Tower here in Auckland. Is you're not going to die, you're fine, and your emotional response is just an emotional response. So as long as you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, you're fine. And I think that's a very similar thing that a coach needs to do with an athlete when, yeah, objectively on paper everything's going right, but they feel like things aren't going well. I've had a bad day. We're 3 weeks out. I don't know if I can hit my openers. Or maybe the openers felt heavy, and now I'm really nervous about next week, and understanding how to deal with that. And even if just simply telling them everything's fine, you've hit your numbers, that can provide some emotional support. But actually learning about the person and what they need to feel that sense of support and reassurance is really important. And I think sometimes the people, like you said, Omar, who just see it as a couple spreadsheets, one for nutrition, one for training, they feel like reassurance is almost an insult. Like, look, the plan's going fine. It's not my job to help you deal with the shit, And I've heard a lot of coaches say that to me in private or even publicly, like, it's not my job to babysit or handhold my athletes or whatever. And of course, that basically is a definition for anything besides me writing your program or changing your macros. And look, if you want to do that, that's fine. Just don't call yourself a coach. You can be a nutrition and training consultant, Yeah.
Now to play, so 2 things. The first, I just want to confirm something. Eric, you said you have a mild fear of heights?
I do.
And you were in the Air Force? You never were like, I want to be a fighter pilot.
Well, I was never actually on a plane in the Air Force. Yeah. That's actually a big misconception. Like 95% of the people in the Air Force they have tons of different jobs. The Army actually has more planes than the Air Force.
I'm just picturing you in a Top Gun scenario, like taking off and just like trying to self-talk. You're like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Another misconception. Top Gun's the Navy. You're missing out on all of it.
It's quite clear that I've never been in the military before.
Yeah,
Shocker.
Planes don't bother me at all. And in fact, really, really high heights don't bother me either. But when I can actually see the ground and I can see an edge, that triggers something in my, my basal ganglia or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So second now, serious a point. To almost play devil's advocate, I'm curious what both of you guys think, especially because you get into the psychology of lifting, the psychology of coaching. Would you say that some individuals self-select who their coaches are based obviously on their personality, what type of fit they think it would be? And what I mean when I say that is I've heard the same thing. So Eric, I wouldn't want to have a coach where it's like, here's a spreadsheet, like your input output machine, like do this. Even the notion of having an emotional response to training or to nutrition is ludicrous because like that's you being weak. You know what I mean? But there are some individuals that I've observed, at least it seems to me from the outside perspective of looking in, that some individuals kind of thrive off of that. Where it's like, I got it, like I'm tough. Like they don't want even the concept of reassurance is in some weird proxy like a sign of weakness. And so just taking a look at the online coaching, different coaching systems, would you say that sometimes individuals tend to self-select towards what they think would be their best coaching, practice that would work for them? Because I've seen that before. Like, you're right. I think to myself, like, is this the healthiest relationship for long-term progress as a coach? Wouldn't you hope you want some sort of autonomy absolutely to develop within the individual where they understand they have their own subjective experience. The coach is able to notify kind of like a light from the outside. Hey, like, I think this works over time, but having basically no feedback whatsoever other than concrete numbers for what you're supposed to do seems tough. Like, what do you guys think?
Bryce, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, man.
Oh, man. I think almost all athletes self-select for the type of qualities they're looking for in a coach. And if they don't, those are the relationships that don't really last, a whole long period of time. Not all athletes are kind of the touchy-feely, like, I want to be supported. Like, let me tell you about my experience in training. Some just want to be told what to do. I've talked to Hanny, who's one of the coaches for TSA, and his relationship with a few athletes are basically like drill sergeant like, like athletes need to just be told to suck it up and get the work done. And they enjoy that. That's not just punishment for them. That is what they need to be a better athlete. And so, it really takes all types, and your job as a coach, if you want to do this as a career path, is to mold yourself to what you think the athletes need, not for the athlete to mold themselves to what you need.
Yeah.
Really good point.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly what I was going to touch on if Bryce didn't bring it up, but he lobbed that softball right at me, so I'm going to knock it out of, it might be a foul ball, but I'll hit it far. I don't know how baseball works. So, I think for one, yes, people do self-select into certain coaches, and I think the reality of online coaching is such that your online presence and your, again, to throw up my own mouth, your brand dictates the type of people who will want to work with you. And that both hurts and hinders you. It gives you some control to tell people, here's what you're going to expect. Here's my style, and then you're more likely to get athletes who are going to work well with that. That's kind of good, but it also creates these expectations, which are not always great. Because, like Bryce said, a good coach does not just have a style. They're going to have a personality. They're a person. They're not just like some chameleon who can adapt to every single type of different athlete. But as much as you are capable while still being able to do your job effectively, you need to mold your role as the role that athlete needs, or your best perception of that, which largely comes from asking them what they need and talking to them and giving them feedback. But I think the online coaching reality does cause some problems. So, for example, one thing that we do at 3DMJ that has been a staple since, 10 years now, is that we don't let athletes select which coach they want to work with. Yeah. Because not all of us have the same online profile. Like, not a lot of people know much about Brad Loomis. And
you're trying to say you're a big deal. I get it, Eric.
Correct. Yeah. But there was a point where basically whoever had the biggest social media profile was perceived to be the good coaches. And I think that's, like, currently right now, that's actively not true. Like I haven't taken, I'm really good with my athletes I've been working with for years. Like I've been working with Bryce for 10 years, but right now he's one of two athletes who I'm currently working with out of a stable of like maybe 6 or 7.
Eric's like, it's not you, Omar.
Yeah, you don't
I don't
count, buddy. Sorry.
I said athlete.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
I have one Gen Pop person I'm trying to get rid of. I won't name any names. Yeah. No. But so like I've got, at any given time, I'm working with no more than 5 athletes, and they're people who I've been working with for a long time. So I'm really great working with them, but I would say I'm less good as a coach broadly than Alberto, Jeff, and Brad, who have been full-time 30 to 50 athletes since 2009, Well, that to me, that ended around 2014 when I started or really got into the meat of my PhD. And, like I'd say I'm probably the best coach for Bryce right now, just because I got 10 years of experience. Maybe there's someone better out there. I don't know. Grass is always greener, right? Fire me. But I guess what I'm saying is that the perception of me being kind of the science face of 3DMJ is discordant with who is the best coach at 3DMJ, who has the most coaching experience, who is the best able to adapt quickly and start helping someone make progress early on. And I think there's a lot of people who treat coaching like buying a product rather than a service. They'll coach hop because they expect, whichever coach gets me the biggest gains in my total, that's the good coach, rather than realizing that they're going to get better with me over like it should be like a fine wine. This relationship should improve over time. And if it doesn't, that's an issue. But expecting some kind of magical results immediately, that's expecting a coach to be just what some coaches think they are, which is just a spreadsheet. And if you either got a good spreadsheet or a bad spreadsheet. It's good coach, bad coach, same thing, right? And some coaches I know won't even share their spreadsheets. Like they don't want their programs to get out there. And I think that's sad, because if your only value is the programs you write, you're not really coaching, So it's an interesting thing. So we don't allow people to select which coach they want to work with, because it creates a whole lot of expectancy. And if someone comes to us and we say, hey, you're going to get assigned to one of our coaches, and that's a deal breaker for working with Team 3DMJ, that's probably a good thing they're not working with us, because that means they have really strong expectancy and desires with someone. And they don't realize that, sure, you might be listening to me on a podcast or, or watching Berto on his Instagram stories or following all of Jeff's posts, and you feel like you have a relationship with them, but it's a one-sided relationship. They don't even know who you are. And that's not to say to devalue social media. I think it's great. We put ourselves out there to give people a sense of understanding. But once you start coaching with someone, it needs to be a two-way street. You're not getting something from me. We're creating something together. And if you can't even give someone a chance to start a relationship because they don't have a social media profile or whatever, then, that expectancy is something that we have to overcome. Like the last thing I want as a coach is to be put up on a pedestal. Like, oh my God, I've been following your stuff for 10 years. You're amazing. I can't wait to work with you. I know you're going to help me achieve my best. Like, oh my God, the pressure that puts on me and the role I have to play. I'd much rather actually start with someone relatively fresh and someone who is coming to the table like I am. Like I'm just meeting you, and that's almost impossible to do once you become successful in online coaching. But the closer you can get to that allows you to create the most appropriate individualized coaching relationship with someone. So it's a problem that one has to manage that they don't even think about in the kind of online coaching community or reality or blogosphere.
Well, let me just be devil's advocate for a second, because I've struggled with that same thing myself, and so is TSA, and I'm sure a bunch of other powerlifting companies in the industry. Like if someone is coming to 3DMJ and they like Eric, they want to be coached by Eric, but they get assigned to another coach, are they coming to the company themselves? So are they expecting the service from the company itself, or what is the actual qualities they're looking for in a coach if they were set on Eric but now they don't get Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, it's a decision every coaching company has to make, and it's one with pros and cons. I definitely don't think like unequivocally all the pros fall on the side of assigning a coach versus letting them choose. But I think each company has to decide whether or not it makes sense for them. Like the cons for us of having people allowed to choose their own coaches can cause issues, like for example, a lot of people follow me for sciencey reasons, right? But when I coach people, I take a much more holistic approach, and Like if they're going to be constantly trying to do what's optimal, it's the same coaching experience for me every single time of trying to get them to chill the hell out, and taking, like basically it's me reliving my past of being the OCD crazy person and trying to find balance. And I can only do that so many times before I just, want to go crazy. No, but more seriously, it creates two different problems. So one is you might get people who come to you disappointed and they're starting off on the wrong foot. Like they have to convince themselves, okay, fine, I'll work with X person who's not the person I wanted to work with. And that's not a great starting point for that coach either. Like now they have to show them that they're actually a good coach. I have a lot of faith in the coaches we have that I know whoever they get assigned to, they've got a really good chance of having a good experience. And history is borne that out, I would say, with 3DMJ. But yeah, that is a con. Like someone who really wanted to work with Alberto and gets assigned to Jeff is going to be disappointed to start, or any other example or combination you could think of. And someone who, like the flip side of that, so to in your scenario, that the pros of that are, man, I wanted to come work with Bryce. I'm working with Bryce. I'm really excited. I'm going to put forth a ton of effort. I have a lot of belief and expectancy that's positive towards this program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, much like when we were teenagers and we first saw our father or mother be fallible, you have that existential crisis that you may not even have realized when your coach does say, I don't know, makes an error, misses a report, has their own problem, or shows themselves not to be just this perfect image of social media that you've created in your head and it's partially been manufactured either intentionally or unintentionally online. When they don't meet your expectation, that is a serious issue, and it can create a lot of problems as well. So I think regardless of what one does, you have to be aware of the issues of online coaching. We've talked about this before in Iron Culture to kind of connect other dots, but a lot of coaches, the way they will advertise themselves is these 12-week transformations. And this happened in powerlifting too. It's not just like a physique thing. Like here was their total then, here's their total now. And you're quantifying your coaching ability by basically how much did someone add to their total in the first 12 weeks they worked with you, right? And therefore, people come to you expecting that. Like people go, I want to hire TSA because I've seen more people add 60 kilos to their total than the 20 that I saw with, Joe and Jane's powerlifting online service. They're great, by the way. You should check them out. So like, I think coaches do themselves a potential disservice and set themselves up for these situations where they're treated like a product rather than a service when they do that. I understand why they do it. I understand the pressure to do it, but I think it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot in the long run. And really, I think that's what I really appreciate about TSA is how much work you guys have done in putting forth messages about coaching style, coaching psychology, athlete mental health, burnout, longevity. Is it kind of short circuits that whole problem of creating yourself in one certain image, doing the before and afters, and then dealing with either the pros and cons. When you guys kind of highlight like, hey, you're a person and we want to help you be the best person you can who also powerlifts, I think it creates a whole different discussion, which is less likely to cause these problems.
Yeah, one thing we really try to do when we want to highlight athletes, it's important for social media. Like you can't just not talk about your athletes, and that's something we used to try to do, and now we're like, well, that's not doing us very well either. Like let's talk about our athletes and some of the successes they're having. But as we do that, we try as much as possible to highlight effort rather than outcome, and just how hard the athletes are working rather than the numbers that they're putting up, because we work with athletes from beginners all the way to advanced athletes, and 2.5 kilos on your total when that required just as much work over 10 weeks is just as impressive as 15 kilos on your total, for different athletes in different circumstances, because genetics is a roll of the dice, and what matters is how hard you work and what you get out of it. And we try to show that message, like we're not just for the elite.
Now, let me ask you, Bryce, maybe this question. From being a coach now for a while and coaching a lot of individuals, and one might ask, well, wait a second, you're a coach. Why do you need a coach then? What utility do you personally find in having a coach? Is that separation, that accountability for you yourself? What do you find in terms of the utility of having a coach still to this day?
So it's quite a lot of things. One thing goes back to the conversation we had about coaching being more than just the numbers on the spreadsheet. Like I've seen enough of Eric's training of me to just be like, all right, I'm cool with you, Eric. I'm good. I can write it down. I'll take care of myself from now. But that's really not about it. It's about those moments when, I'm crying in the corner in the gym when a lift didn't go well, and I need to lean on someone for support, and I know that Eric is there, and I don't even consider the time zone, and I just message you, and like you'll get back to me, and that has pulled me out of really dark places sometimes, and moments where I've had intense back pain going into world championships and we needed to make modifications on the spot. It's far, far more than just the ability to put numbers on a page. And that's just part of our previous conversation.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. You've brought up, and Eric said that before, and it's not that it was ominous, but he said basically you remain injury free and you're going to be, or you're going to go far. Is that right, Eric? I don't know if you said world champion. You said, you remain healthy.
I think I said, so back in the day, APA, and I think actually USAPL has them now, they have different classifications like class 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, master, elite. And I said, and this is back when master and elite both seemed really crazy and kind of off in the distance. And I said, the difference between lifters who reach the master qualification and elite is, in many times, did you get hurt? And how many times, and how well could we mitigate that? And I think I even went as far to say, I don't know if I said it to Bryce at the time or I said it to the 3DMJ crew, but I said, I think if we can keep him injury free, he'll be a world champion one day.
Yeah, because I think my question was going to be for coaching now for both of you. It's easy when someone's reporting in and everything is going as you desire it. So let's say a physique competitor, a bodybuilder, it's like, yep, I hit my macros, things are going great, training's going well. How does coaching change, evolve, or adapt when you have negative news or things that don't go as planned? So I used the example, Bryce, you spoke about injuries or setbacks. How does that then change, and how does that roll? What does it take the shape of?
So we've got highly motivated athletes who pay a coach a bunch of money every month, and they go in the gym and they don't miss training sessions, and they do this for a very long time. Like this forms a core part of their identity as a person. I'm a powerlifter, I'm training, I have this competition at a certain period of time. So when something like an injury takes that away, not only is there the details about how are we going to get them back to baseline, there's a huge emotional vacuum that comes in, whether it's I'm not able to train the way that I want to, or I'm not able to expect the same results I was looking for, or now I can't be in the gym with my friends or train. Like it affects so many different parts, up to the point of either attempted or actual suicide when we're talking pro athletes. I went to this conference down in Boulder with a bunch of pro athletes across different sports, and their coping with injury had led them very close to attempting to take their own life. When you take everything away, depending on how serious the injury is. So there's the part of coaching that is supporting the brain, and there's the part that's supporting the body. And we need to the best of our ability and staying within our lanes, take care of both, and be able to seek and ask for help when, we need to get a physio involved or something like that.
Yeah, I can think of some, it's people who go, wow, like suicide, that's crazy. I think people forget, or maybe they don't know, maybe they do know. We're talking to the occultists here. I think a lot of them get this, that for many people who lift weights, and it's something they do for life or at a very high level as an athlete, like Bryce said, it becomes a part of your identity. So losing the ability to lift is losing like a part of yourself. There's also a lot of us who our primary coping strategy for stress is also lifting. Yes, we do it for sport. Yes, we do it for physique or whatever, but it's also where we work things out. On a bad day, you're looking forward to lifting, which is a very different experience to a lot of people out there who don't like training, but do it kind of like they do brushing their teeth. Like, oh, this is good for my health, I'll do it. They get stressed, they stop training. But for someone who alleviates stress with training, when you can no longer train, it's this feed forward mechanism that really just becomes this runaway train off the tracks, where there's a stressor. That's a problem in and of itself. And now it's preventing you from training. So now you can no longer cope with that stress. And that's a little worse. But guess what? You can also no longer cope with the rest of your stress if you lost your primary coping mechanism. So all of a sudden, it gets amplified, and each missed session makes things worse. And there's physiological reasons for that. There's endorphin releases and all kind of stuff going on as you have that dopamine response and your ability to manage stress, and you feel worse. You see your body composition start to degrade. Your strength, a lot of the metrics that we use as social currency in our community go down or go away. So you can see people have some really extreme responses. And hopefully a good coach is someone who, way before this even happens, identifies that, hey, you're way too wrapped up into being a lifter. Like, I think I've said this many times, and it's a quote I stole from Alberto Nunez a long time ago, that you need to diversify your happiness portfolio. And one thing I like about having started with bodybuilding being the primary thing I got into in coaching is that it just turns the volume up on everything to like 15 or 11, to quote Spinal Tap, on a scale of 1 to 10, just because the issues are so acute, magnified, drastic, and the personalities are so extreme that are brought into it that they're highlighted so quickly. And I think it's easy for us to forget that it happens in powerlifting too. It's like, this is like something that ex-athletes did. Now they lift. It's just a hobby. They're just doing it. But I think like anything in life, once you're rewarded for it, a community is created around it. Once it becomes like your income. So many powerlifters, once they get reasonably involved in the sport, it becomes their career. And then the way they market it is their own powerlifting success. And now it's like, am I even a coach anymore? I have imposter syndrome. I can't lift. I can't deal with my stress. And maybe you're not doing powerlifting to improve your physique to the same degree that a bodybuilder does, but doing high volume squat, bench press, and deadlift definitely will improve your physique, and stopping, you will see the difference. And then if you also are someone who, doesn't change the way you eat, like all of a sudden, just your kind of life falls apart. And that happens in the NFL, when it may be your entire family's ticket out of poverty, or it can happen just to the individual who is someone with a 9-to-5 job who got into powerlifting in their 20s. And I think that's just something that can't be, or shouldn't be, I should say, downplayed, because it's a real thing for sure.
Yeah. I do think all iron culture enthusiasts can understand that, Bryce, when you said it's very real for certain athletes to feel suicide or those tendencies where their identity is ripped away from them. I'm actually thinking right now, Eric, of the movie Aronofsky's The Wrestler with Robin the Ram Brzezinski, where part of what it is that he's facing his downward career trajectory, but he has so many ailments and so many things that are wrong with him where he can't operate because he's a professional wrestler that puts on a show. He's just so beat up and so banged up that he can't do what he wants to do, and he's just like hobbling around.
Oh, who's the lead actor in that? That's he was in Sin City.
Yeah. Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke did a great job in The Wrestler.
Oh yeah. But just the pathos that then develops where you're not where you were, and there's things outside of the physical. But when that's your identity, let's say you're a top athlete, not taking anything away from what we do, but like you get paid millions and millions of dollars, and that's your whole identity, and that social currency is amplified tenfold. No, I could totally see that, and that's why I guess I was wondering. When we talk about risk and mitigating everything, it's all well and good coaching when things are going fine, where you're not really tested. I kind of, and maybe you guys could correct me, I feel that coaching is really put to the test on those downstream effects, on those negatives that tend to occur, because then you really find, okay, what are some of these potential things that we need to work on? What do I need to do as a coach to better understand this athlete? Because once you understand an athlete when it's going well, but if someone's just sending you feedback, yeah, coach, hit my macros, yeah, hit my training, it's like, how much are you really getting to know them versus something bad happening? So yeah, I found that very interesting.
I think in those cases too, there's a real opportunity to get even closer to the athlete or coach, depending on who we're talking about. It's that shared struggle of we're both going through something and we come out the other side. This is something that people in the Army experience, and hell, even CrossFitters going through a WOD together experience, kind of that shared struggle. So yeah, coming out something difficult like that can be a positive too.
Now, this is really weird to admit, but I'll just admit it. Eric, I actually injured myself last year, moss wrestling you, just so I knew you'd get closer to me. My back's fine.
Your stalker game has always been on point. I mean, you don't necessarily have athletic talent, but your ability to manipulate situations and people to insert yourself in their lives, no matter how bad they don't want you there. Right. I have to say, if there was a world championship for that, you wouldn't be allowed to compete because it would be like a sport you created. So
thank you. So
props where it's due. Yeah.
Now we're stuck together, like the great movie.
Like that great movie. right up there with the wrestler. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm referencing. We have a joke, Bryce, around here. Like I reference like a Tarkovsky film, Kurosawa, this and that, and Eric will be like, "Yeah, like the great movie Stuck Together." Matt Damon and the other guy. Oh, it's seminal, classic.
Like Death Wish 6, where Bronson wouldn't even do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that to bring someone that kind of looked like him, but not really. Ooh.
Like straight to video classic Babysitters 3. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because you skipped Babysitter 2, which was also straight to video. Like, whoo, that's bad.
Yeah. But there's a funny, scary experience as a coach when you do realize that you're more than a spreadsheet. Is that it's a good thing, right? Now you can actually be more effective and helpful, and you realize your value is expanded. And it gives you a whole new skill set to develop. And you realize that it's not a big deal if someone gets your spreadsheets, right? It's not a big deal if someone starts using your programming. Like the constant occurrence you'll hear when you hang out with online coaches, if they start talking shit or if they're in a bad mood, is like, I had this one client, he started his own coaching business, stole my spreadsheets. The son of a bitch. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Like that guy's such an asshole. And I'm just kind of like, guys, really? Is that all you are? Like, why does this bother you? Like, it's an Excel sheet. All right, for Christ's sake. So anyway, but that's great, right? You realize you have value, and hopefully you actually step into that and become a better coach. But it also becomes really scary because now, where does your scope of practice end? One of the biggest realizations I had once I started doing real coaching, and that was something from the outset that we tried to do with 3DMJ, was that, oh man, there's some stuff we're not qualified for. And like who we've had on the podcast, Amanda Rizzo, our mental health consultant, and Steve Taylor, who we did some work together, you and I, Omar, with our Kaizen Nutrition program, the RD for Team 3DMJ, and then also Nick Licamelli, who we had on our DPT. So realizing that there is a limit to your scope, and I don't want to like put Bryce's business out there, but there was a time, like right now, like if you were to watch commentators at Worlds or USAPL talk about Bryce, they'll throw around nicknames for him, and one of them is Mr. Consistency. And I think that's incredible because it speaks to Bryce as an athlete that's one of his biggest, like that's why he's a threat, is because if you're waiting around for Bryce to make an error so you can, win, that's a bad gamble, Like there have been times when Bryce has not had the squat, bench, or deadlift record, but has had the total record, which means that he's good in all three lifts and he's consistent. He goes like 8 or 9 for 9 most of the time. But there was a time when he really struggled with that back 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. And I had to have the awareness and step into the fear as a coach of, I don't know how to help this. This is something that's outside of my scope. This is something that like a sports psych would be better suited to handling. I don't have the training for that. And I had to have both, one, the awareness of my scope, let's say the humility to understand that I couldn't be his everything and solve everything. And the willingness to say, hey, here's where my expertise ends, and the way I can help you the best is to help you find resources and to help you evaluate like what areas would be good to supplement that. And that was one of the catalysts, because that happened a while ago, for us to really build out that system at 3DMJ so that we had, a skeletal, a musculoskeletal injury specialist, a clinical nutrition specialist, and then a mental health specialist, because you can't do it all as a coach. And I think that's one of the most important skill sets of a true coach, is to understand what you can and can't do and to help your athlete find resources. And like Bryce said, so they have that robustness, so they can leave the nest and know what things they can, what resources they have available to them.
Wait, you mean to tell me that one coach doesn't have all the answers, even though they say they have all the answers? And perhaps the reason why they want to try and appear to have so much authority is because underneath there's so much fragility? Is that what you're trying to say, Eric?
I mean, I have all the answers. I can't speak for anyone else.
Right.
But since I have all the answers, that means that not everyone else can have all the answers.
You done took him. It's like, I got the answer. It's like, can we share them? Is it widely available? Nope. Just me.
It's like all things in life, zero-sum game. Yep.
Yeah. If I win, everyone else loses.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think about that question sometimes. Like if money was no object, what would be best for athletes, like a powerlifting athlete? And I look at a lot of the sports where money is literally no object, like American football and soccer and stuff like that. And there's like 8 to 10 coaches for this team and specialists and, defensive line, offensive line. Here's someone for strength and conditioning. Here's, someone for nutrition. There's a sports psychologist like that. That I think is the model of someone being supported by a team. Every individual athlete not only has the other athletes that they're on a team with, but they have a team of coaches that they can kind of fall back on. And the coaches can problem solve with each other for the athletes, and kind of everything is best suited for the athlete. And kind of on that same topic, I find it personally hard to feel like I'm giving my absolute best. Like I've had times where I really pushed my number of athletes that I'm working with up a little bit too high, and athletes just aren't getting like there's a cap to where you can effectively, really coach with a capital C, a certain number of athletes before you just can't give that many people the attention to spot those fine details and things you might miss otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. I've also found there's a point for each coach, and I think it is very coach dependent to where there's that like quality versus quantity. I think that's something to do with how invested you are in your athletes, how well. I know for me, the more I can have like a part of my brain just be coach that I don't access until it's time to do coaching, that really helps me. And if I don't do that, like I remember there was a time early on in my personal training career where I just had my clients on my mind all the time, and I would probably overcommit. They'd have my phone number, they'd have access to me. I'd be putting out fires all the time, and I just became completely emotionally drained within the first couple of years of doing personal training. So I had to learn to compartmentalize. I didn't give my phone number out. I created structure for coaching, but it was structure for coaching, but a lot of it was boundaries. And what I didn't realize, a nice side effect of this, was that it allowed athletes to solve problems on their own. One of the things we'd always say in 3DMJ to our clients is there's no emergencies in bodybuilding. You've got to build some resiliency. You're going to have to eat like 4 to 6 meals every day. And you're going to have to figure out how to hit your macros. You're going to have to figure out how to travel. You're going to have to do all these things. And I'll give you those skills. But what we're not going to be doing is you saying, hey, coach, I left my Tupperware at my house. What do I do for lunch? Try it out. And in your next report, we'll talk about it, because they're like, and if that results and you then went on a binge fest for that day, then that's something we need to work on, Right. But if the only thing that stops you from going on a binge fest is me telling you what to do for lunch, then I'm a huge crutch. You have no ability to be a bodybuilder to integrate that into life, and you're going to be hugely susceptible to disordered eating patterns, binge eating disorder, struggles with your body image as a result of that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that resiliency is something that came as a nice bonus to me creating that structure that gave me the emotional ability to actually be a coach. But I know other coaches, like Alberto's a great example, where he can handle a huge client load and he can tell you everything about every single one of those clients. And I think it's just his personality. Like he does a really good job being invested. He doesn't get emotionally overloaded. He has this uncanny ability to be detached, but also incredibly involved with each person. And I mean detached in a way that allows him to give them unbiased emotional support. But for me, like I have to compartmentalize it. And I don't think about athletes until it's coaching time. And that allows me to operate in my life. But like Bryce was talking about, like if you're doing a good job as a coach, there are times when they need to message you on a random Thursday for emotional support. That's just the reality of being a coach. And you get a non-predictable amount of those instances per athlete based on what's going on, where they're at in their life, their age, your coaching relationship. So if you've got 40, and sure, they've all got the day of the week they report in on, they've got their spreadsheet, you record them their video, like to give you a little behind the scene look into when I had 40 athletes at any given time, each one of them has a day, Monday through Friday, they report in on. They know I will answer one email per day from them within a 24-hour period. If they report off their day, then I will report to them late as well. It's kind of like a nice correction system because I got my 6 athletes on Monday through Friday, and I don't have time for doing anything else beside that. I'm doing a damn masters. So if you report outside of your window, that's an issue. And I kind of had like a 3 strikes you're out rule sort of thing. Like if you really can't just report in on one day, even though we established that's the day for you, then this isn't working for me. No offense. So anyway, I set up the structure, but I know that there's going to be these times when these 36 athletes or 30 athletes or whatever are going to message me outside of those times. That's normal. It's life. It's bodybuilding. It's powerlifting. It's what I've got to do. And all of those little blips that might come up as a Facebook message or an email on a Saturday or a Sunday that you look at and you decide, is this something I need to respond to? They add up. And when you've got 40 of those happening or 30 of those happening, it starts to impact everything else. And I think that's where you have to really figure out where those lines are drawn. And I remember when I didn't have that structure set up, I could take on like half as many athletes. Like 20 would fatigue me. And then I was able to work in the low 40s at my peak with 3DMJ because of those systems. But any more than that, then each one of those individual athletes would get a poor coaching relationship. So I think that's something that you really have to realize getting into coaching, is that the more you become a true big C coach, like Bryce said, the more you have to create systems, the more you have to manage your own boundaries and your emotional attachment to the client, the access they have to you, and figure out what is what they need versus what you need. And there is some kind of crisscross point where you're at peak, but any more than that is detrimental to you or the clients or both.
Bryce, what are for you some lessons that you've learned over the last, let's say, TSA? Would that be? Is it 2013 or 14?
Yeah, late 2013.
Okay, yeah, I've been creeping you. Don't, as Eric said, I'm a great stalker. It's just what I do. What are some lessons? It's one of my qualities of the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years. What are some lessons being a coach that you've learned from doing the process?
Oh man, I have gotten a lot more flexible with my actual programming prescriptions, like not only autoregulation, but giving athletes varied numbers of sets, varied length of blocks, just flexibility, like no one's business. I mean, this isn't to say like, hey, I just want you to go in the gym and just do whatever today. It's controlled flexibility too. There's goals and stuff like that, but I want the athlete to be okay with pushing when that's warranted and to be okay with backing off when things are feeling too heavy. And I find that prevents a lot of problems from happening before they ever become problems. I think it's important to give some structure to updates, and I really, really try to have to have weekly updates with my athletes to be more about just what happened to the barbell. I want to hear about what's going on with their life. What are things like outside the gym as well, because those are some of those moments that allow you to get a little bit closer to an athlete. Or, you can bring up something like, oh, how's your cat, or how was that trip to whatever, or something like that. And that feels good to both the athlete and the coach. So I try to do that to the extent that it can. I know that sounds a little bit like, I don't know, like programming your life. Like, okay, make sure to ask about something outside the gym now. But it's just a general rule of thumb to just try to make it more about the numbers.
Or less about the numbers, not just about the numbers.
Sorry, absolutely backwards. Less about the numbers.
It's all no. What we learned from this podcast, it's all about the numbers. Your feelings don't matter. I want you to go out there. I want you to hit the numbers. Your body feels like shit. Walk it off and hit that PR.
Absolutely. I actually really love some of Bryce's, like the intersection of your skills to produce some pretty cool stuff. So, like, for those who don't know, Bryce is like an Excel whiz. Another fun part of the Kaizen program we created, that was actually Bryce creating the spreadsheets, Steve creating the meal plans, and me just talking in front of a camera, and Omar making me laugh behind the scenes. It was great.
Yeah. No.
But anyway,
I was your coach, life coach, though.
Yes. Yeah. And it's pretty cool to see Bryce, how he's been able to like create like spreadsheets that will have something to reflect upon that pops up, or a visualization practice that pops up. And I think that is such an interesting crossover of two cultures. Like the really, really spreadsheet focused, heavy programming focused individuals are typically, not always, the individuals who aren't that great as a holistic coach and just want to be the programmer. But to then see the coaching psychology, visualization, athlete care, prevention of burnout, and diversification of your focus and athlete identity embedded into a spreadsheet, I think it puts that forth into a medium that those people who really need to understand that's important can see it. And I think you've probably done a lot of good through even that just minor, interesting crossover skill set as far as improving the the way coaches do things in powerlifting through those sheets you've given out through TSA.
I've seen a few people kind of pick up on some of that stuff, so I'm super happy to be passing some of that on. Like you mentioned early on, I think the three big reasons people stop powerlifting are you get injured and you can't do it anymore. You get mentally burned out and you don't want to do it anymore, or something life happens and you decide you just of your own volition want to stop powerlifting. You know, you're having a baby, or you switch careers, or you go into a grad program and don't have time for it. But those are kind of the three big things I've noticed.
This kind of goes back to the last time we had you on, Bryce, when we had Isabella on. How often do you think today in the social media age, people have accelerated burnout because of comparison with other people? I know, like, I'm not anti-extrinsic motivation, but I know that the ignorance I had in 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10 as to how good I was compared to if we just magically made everyone a power lifter, which is basically what's happened today with USAPL when we have 1,300 USAPL Run Nationals, and now the qualifying total is higher than it would used to be as an elite total for the APA back in the day. But I remember totaling over 1,200 pounds as a 198 and even a 220, and thinking that I was a pretty damn good power lifter. Like, I'm not elite, I'm not world class, I'll get there one day. But this was at a time when if you totaled 1,500 in the 220 class, you could win a regional meet, which was, I remember that specifically happening. I think John Stewart was the guy who won the APA California with a 1,500 total in the 220s. And now that would not even qualify him to compete at USAPL Nationals, which to me is pretty, it just goes to show you how far it's come. So anyway, part of my motivation, and not all of it, and I'd say a decreasing part of my motivation over time, was the fact that I was being rewarded by doing pretty well. I was, like, in these local meets placing second or third and occasionally first in the 198 class. And I was like, okay, Bryce is an alien. That's fine. Maybe one day I'll get close to that, but I'm still pretty good. And I think that's a much harder ignorance to maintain today when every single person on the planet has an Instagram is lifting, and you're always bombarded with people who have like a 500 Wilks. It makes it seem like it's part and parlance of just, that's everybody, and you're the weakling, even though you might be a class 1 lifter and objectively stronger than 85% of the rest of USAPL. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on
that? It's definitely a bigger problem than it used to be. And I was actually just on a call with an athlete a little earlier today, and she was talking about the fact that she had compared herself to lifters a little bit more recently than she did, and kind of negatively affected her. And yeah, it's something that a lot of people do, and I think there's a few reasons for that. One, powerlifting is super measurable, so it's very, very easy to say, oh, I'm either better than this lifter or worse, and there's very little in between. You could talk about the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, but really it's not only easy to see what someone else is doing, but how fast they're making progress, because everyone puts everything online, and that can make you feel better about yourself or worse about yourself. So kind of minding how much access you give yourself to that is really the only way at this point you can control it, because you can't stop someone else from posting. So you can control how much you're looking at it and exposing yourself to it. I've certainly gone through that myself. So as a result, it's possible that burnout as a whole might be increasing. That's definitely a dimension of it. And the other thing just may be how much harder people are training these days to try to get better quicker versus before, when maybe there was a slightly more measured approach.
Yeah, I think it does create a sense of urgency. One thing I've definitely seen is juniors talk a lot about, I'm no longer going to be a junior. Like, I've got to lift in the open. And I've got to get my totals up to snuff. And you see them training with this fervor because they're constantly aware of this impending quote unquote doom of people who are stronger. Even though when you actually look at the stats, like, juniors aren't even that much weaker than the open. So it's definitely this kind of created falsehood where you always have access to people who are where you should be, quote unquote. And I think, yeah, you get people training like they're in a peaking cycle all the time. And that's not sustainable in most cases. So I think it's a tough thing, and it's something that's become more and more something I've had to think about as a coach, which has definitely changed.
The other thing though is, like, it's not just powerlifting. It's not that powerlifting is getting better. So let's take other well-established sports, something like basketball or baseball or football or something. And you're starting off at age 10, and I doubt there's a whole lot of burnout about thinking I'm not insert your favorite baseball player right now. Why aren't I making progress as a 10-year-old to get there? And maybe it's just that it's less measurable, or maybe that there are more levels of progress to get you up to the major leagues than there are. You got peewees, then you play high school, and then you've got clubs, and at each level you kind of you're in a slightly bigger pond and a bigger pond rather than just being in the same pond for everyone.
I totally agree with that. I think it's a combination of three things. So for one, it's very measurable, like you said. Every training session is an estimation of what your strength is, and you can gauge that against who you're comparing yourself to and the records that are kept. Two, it's an individual sport. You can't sit there and go, you know what, I might be the second string strong safety on this team, but I play an important role. Our first string guy can't play all the time, and I'm part of this team victory. Mm-hmm. I remember there's a totally different type of pressure when the little bit of my life where I played football, like 1 year, and the sense of enjoyment and inclusion, and it's just a very, very different structure. It reminded me more of actually being in like basic training in the Air Force than it did competing in individual sport. Individual sport, everything's on your shoulders. It's your goals, your work. And I think there's some benefit to joining a quote unquote team like Team TSA or Team 3DMJ. And we try to create that to give some outlet, support, and all those things to make it less pressureful, if you will. And then the third part is that people only get into it, not only, but primarily get into the sport as an adult. And then the structure is such that there isn't those nice, easy gradations. Like the structure's there, but it's not enforced. It's like optional. Like, for example, in bodybuilding, you want to compete in novice, you can, but you can definitely join the open. It's open, right? Where it's not like if you just started to play baseball, it's like, yeah, you can play peewee, or we'll let you go play against the New York Mets. That's fine. Like, if you want to do that, you can walk on and play in a professional game. So you are restricted from comparing yourself to the next level until you get there. And I think there's actually a lot of value in creating that structure and giving people the stepwise comparisons. So it's not just, I've been lifting 12 weeks and I'm comparing myself to the world champ. Like that is kind of crazy, when you think about it. And I think it comes from most people get into powerlifting who are already lifting. So I think it's the convergence of all those factors. That's a very astute observation, Bryce. And I think it will require a combination of things on the athlete doing self-management and realizing they have control over the comparison. Matt Gary's talked a lot about that. It's a fire hose of information, but you can turn off the valve at any time. It's going to take some work on the organization to actually impose that structure, do things like regionals, like I think the USAPL has done a good job with, creating those different classifications, having different stepwise improvements, and then also just that's pretty much it. The individual, the coach, and the organization all have to play a part of that role in improving that.
I do think a fourth factor when it comes to powerlifting in general and why people want to compete is, unlike in other sports, if you take a look at the tested individuals and especially how it came up via lifting, general lifting, there's kind of the wrong quality being assessed where it's like, I could do that. Like, I'll give you an example, Candido, right? Where Candido is about 180 pounds, 181 pounds. You take a look at his physique, which is not the quality that you should be judging, but it's like, he's kind of like me, right? Like, I'm kind of built like him. You take a look at a bodybuilder, unless you have a delusion, like a natural bodybuilder. We had some bodybuilders, Eric, on this podcast. And it's like, well, okay, that guy has a lot more muscle, or his conditioning is really on point. And so you start assessing kind of other individuals based on different qualities. And it's that sense that, well, I have this potential. It's like, I think of basketball as an example. It's like, well, I'm not 6'8". Like, I don't have this possibility. But if you take a look at drug tested athletes, by and large, how they physically look, it's like, well, it's within the range. It's like, and the lifting too, I think there's another false illusion. So it's kind of poor comparisons, I would say, would be the fourth one of how you judge skill. And that's the A part. The B part, I would say, would be rate of progress when it comes to lifting, where your initial progress is not the same as later progress, where you go like it. So let's say you take up powerlifting, right? Or you've never squatted or deadlifted before. You did a little bit of general lifting. You did some chest and biceps. All of a sudden you go from bar, 95 pounds, plate and a half, 2 plates, all in the span of 4 to 5 months. You start thinking to yourself, I'm pretty good at this. And so the easy early acquisition they talk about when it comes to any skill development, kind of the curve. And so lifting, so I think powerlifting kind of has an easy onset where you start doing it. You're like, I'm pretty good at this. And it's like, well, wait a second. I went from 3 plates to 4 plates in a year. That means I'll go 4 plates to 5 plates in the second year, 5 plates to 6 plates. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. So it kind of feeds, I think, a little bit into some aspects of our ego. So I think it's interesting. And I think that's good though, because that has enabled a lot of people who traditionally wouldn't have been interested in it. It's like, well, I can excel at this. Their belief that they can excel in it makes them stick around with it, as opposed to like, we're just using an example here, like baseball. We brought up baseball. It's like, yeah, you try and throw a ball, like you see someone's throwing it 100 miles an hour. You throw it the first time, it's like, okay, that's 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. I'm nowhere close to it. Whereas, there's that easy kind of ascension when it comes to lifting.
Yeah, I think all those elements are definitely at play. Man, I remember the first time I hit 1,200 in a meet, it was only a year later that I was at 1,300. But to go from like 1,300 to now like 1,360, 1,380, it's taken me like 8 years,
Yeah.
So,
it's tricky, Eric. I'd say it's tricky. So if you look at the skill curve of other things that you invest time into, the end tail of what you invest tends to be a little bit more rewarding. Whereas like for powerlifting, it's kind of like, I'm a man. Okay, we got it. Let's get in this grind, guys. Let's sit your ass down. Like it's going to be a while. So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, I'd say to wrap this up, Bryce, I want to open the floor to you, my man. Just about coach. So, not even your relationship with Eric. You could tell me now the dirt now if you want, where we reached then, or anything that you want to reflect on yourself or your coaching or the entire coaching process, what you've observed from doing it for a while. Anything at all?
I would say I got super lucky finding Eric as a coach. Not just from ability to program, like it certainly does. And, we can see this when we look at the available coaches, not only in powerlifting, but across many other sports, that the ability to manage both someone's expectations and, be supportive and also, manage the nuts and bolts of how to make someone better is a pretty rare combination, especially in male dominated sports. The attitude for decades was suck it up. You be a man, kind of stuff. Like, let's just put the emotions to the side. And not to say that all of powerlifting is touchy feely and stuff like that. But when those things come up, you have to be able to respond in a way that supports the athlete. And I definitely feel that I got lucky like that. And I try to model that, and I try to tell other people to model that, because those are qualities that I think make for a good human being and someone that supports other human beings. So definitely, on the personal side of things, that's something I'm super fortunate to have experienced.
Wait, Bryce, are you trying to say that if we all try and work a little bit harder to be more agreeable with each other and work together, the world might be a better place?
Yeah, something like that. That's crazy.
Disgusting. That's disgusting. There's a reason I knew I didn't like you.
There's a reason why we really have to do this masculinity and crisis tour, Omar. I think it's really more important.
Everyone doesn't understand that you just gotta try a little harder, stop being such a wuss, and understand that you're a self-made man. Okay,
emotions are the enemy.
Yeah,
and hard work is the pathway forward. I think that's. Actually, another thing I wanted to ask you about, Bryce, is tell us about your future right now as a lifter. For those who don't know, you just came off of a win at USAPL Nationals, Raw Nationals, not too long ago. Tell us about that, and then what you got in store for 2020.
Yeah, so training was going really well. I think I took a year off because I had an injury, and we actively decided to skip a competitive cycle of nationals and therefore worlds as a result. And that ended up being a really good move that just gave me a lot of time to continue to get stronger and avoid kind of one of the big reasons people stop lifting, and that's injury, and came back stronger. And it's not that other lifters got weaker. Things have continued to get more and more competitive, and just barely edged out a very competitive field in the 105s. And now I get to go to Worlds in Belarus. And so I kind of, going into nationals, I had a little bit of a plan B of, if things don't go well, let me just potentially drop to the 93s and compete there. But just kind of already decided to kind of have other plans available just in case. I want to just keep enjoying powerlifting for a long time. But yeah, headed to Belarus, just signed the team contract today. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then at least for now, it's nationals after that, and keep trying to get better and suck it up and be a man.
Hell yeah, brother.
Actually, I think that's a really important thing you brought up, is having, you said the plan Bs. And one thing that I really liked about your prep for USAPL Nationals is you had an opportunity to feel like you'd succeeded, not just whether or not you got the gold, but also you had like a 900 kilo total goal. You had a 2,000 pound total goal. You had a PB opportunity on the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and some just subjective numbers like an 800 pound deadlift, a 500 pound bench. And you gave yourself so many opportunities to experience success that it was no longer this binary good or bad, really risky proposition if you think about it internally. And it's really cool to see that you succeeded. You've improved while the field has improved, and I'm really looking forward to going back to Worlds with you in 2020, even though it's gonna be back in Belarus. but anyway, no, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, man. So I just really appreciate you coming on, and it's a true pleasure and privilege to continue to work with you, my friend.
Well, thank you, and thank you both for having me, Omar. It's been absolutely awesome. I love this topic, and looking at the list of guests, I'm honored and privileged to be among them.
Wow, don't try and out humble Eric. I love it.
He's a humble guy.
Damn it! Now I'm gonna just say what I was thinking, Eric, which is I would like you to apologize to everyone living in Belarus that listens to our podcast, because you just made it seem that, like, obviously that you don't want to go there, and like, why don't you want to go there when we have 3 people that listen from Belarus, and now you're trying to isolate 3 listeners.
Well, I more so just thought I wasn't worthy of going back to Belarus a second time because the country's so awesome.
Ah, yeah, no, that
did I save it? Did I save it?
Nailed it. Because we can't, Bryce. We don't have the financial resources to fight another lawsuit. Okay, like I'm just looking after. I look after our interest. Okay, we're team cult.
Yeah. If we fire ourselves again, who's left?
Make sure you say absolutely nothing controversial to anyone at all.
Yeah.
Done.
Speaking of which, I'm really excited.
Kind of a controversial statement.
It's 2020. It's a new year. We're going to stay tuned, everyone, for our Masculinity in Crisis tour that's coming up in 2021. We'll have more details. We don't want to sideline our guest. Bryce, thank you so much for being on. I have a feeling, okay, you're a strong contender for the first 3-peater on Iron Culture, because I think just what you're doing and everything about you, honestly, how you conduct yourself and how you represent yourself. And I know I spoke a little bit with Jen Thompson about this concept of being an ambassador of a sport. I think you're a really good ambassador of the sport, is what I want to say. Because actually, when we bring up, and there's no shade about against anyone that competed at RUM or anything like that, I think the sport has undergone an evolution that's allowed a diversity of expression of what it means to be a powerlifter. So I think you've been at the forefront of that, and I think that's super cool, man. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. Eric, thanks for being on.
I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to be a guest on my own previously hosted, now co-owned leading podcast.
Yeah. Some would say it's nepotism. I say they're just the facts. You can help us out. Speaking of facts, there is our mortal nemesis. Bryce, I don't know if you know this. Sex with Emily is a popular podcast in the health and fitness space that we do battle with on a near weekly basis for rankings. And interesting that she seems to beat us. So if you want to help us, you can leave a rating and review on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, you can smash that like button. If you don't like the podcast, then just stay far away from it as possible. And we'll catch everyone every single Monday.